Good evening, and welcome to Todd Klindt SharePoint Netcast number 204. Goodness gracious, recorded live on Monday, June 23rd, 2014. But not from Todd's basement, unless he's gotten a really nice basement in the last few weeks. But instead, I'll be your host tonight, Shane Young. You might have seen me once, twice, 1,000 times on the show, but thankfully for all of us, Todd is off on his Mexican vacation. He's in another country. And so me and Lori got together, we got the usernames and passwords, and we decided to take over and have a little fun. Now, Lori decided she'd be a little camera shy, so she's kind of behind the scenes making sure that everything works for me. And you're just stuck with this pretty face for the next few minutes while we go through tonight's netcast. In the notes it does say I'm a disappointing substitute. I don't really believe that, but that's what the notes say, so I have to read the notes. What do you do? Government job. So real quick, I'm supposed to say, hey, Rackspace. Rackspace is who I work for, who Todd works for, and they're the ones that graciously provide all the bandwidth for this fabulous show every week. The wonderful chat room is here with me as always. I managed to get them plugged in. They're already cracking on me. I think their goal is to make me mess up, but short of if they have a whoopee cushion underneath my chair, I think I can handle all their shenanigans as we go along. Speaking of our friends at Rackspace, one of my babies, right, is SharePoint.rackspace.com for all your SharePoint needs. Yay! All right, that's enough commercials. I don't even like commercials when they're my own, so moving on. So production notes from last week. The sound quality was a little bad. Good news is that I think from the test recordings I did, that sound quality this week will probably also be a little bad, so just kind of throwing it out there. Apparently last week in the honeymoon suite, the guest wasn't very good either. Wait, I was the guest, so that's probably not a good thing for me to say. So I think the guest was fine. It must have been the host that was not doing a very good job. All right, so tonight, we kind of got an open forum here to talk about some of the different topics. I wanted to do some like the love lines and have the phone calls in so I could help people with their problems, but that didn't work out. I was actually listening to my baby monitor. My 2-year-old just fell asleep, so hopefully you don't hear anyone screaming. If there's any weird cuts in the middle of this, it's because I had to go stop a sleeping baby. So I wanted to kind of start out with a few random notes, and then we'll kind of get towards the SharePoint stuff as we go. But one of them is I'd like to talk about Todd's dearly beloved Yeti. So I stole this Yeti from Todd and I's boss, Jeff DeVerter, down in San Antonio, and thought, what the heck, right? How hard can it be to get a USB microphone to work with Windows? Well, I can tell you folks that it is a giant pain in the butt. It took me like 2 hours to get this thing working, and then get the webcam to work at the same time, and then find software that could get all of the pieces allowed to sync in a coherent fashion. And I still don't have them. There's all these funny knobs also. I'm not smart enough, but if I recall this knob right here, this is the gain, and then this knob right here is this thing that has different symbols. One of them is infinity, so I don't know if it's like a time machine or what, but I'm certain it could be made to work better. But for me, I just want a microphone, and for the microphone, it's a lot of work just to get a microphone out of it. So anyway, I thought I'd tell you guys that whenever you hear about Todd having these logistical issues and the microphone's not doing its thing, cut him a little slack. I can vouch for the Yeti is a great piece of equipment, but not very friendly for me. And so the next thing here I wanted to talk about is I am hoping that we find Todd. I think that he has slipped off. I don't know. Apparently there's some joke about me being the Shane's cow of Alcatraz. So I don't know if Todd went to Cancun to see if he could get his own Mexican name. Probably down there working with the drug lord, seeing what type of stuff he can have. So I don't know. We wanted the title to be the Mad Cows of Alcatraz, or Shane's Cows of Alcatraz, or something crazy like that. So there you go. I said it during the course of the show, completely in context, trying to make it all work out. So let me know how that goes. We'll see if that becomes the title. So on the SharePoint topics, I kind of was wondering what I should talk about, right? Every time Todd and I get together, we really don't talk about anything good. We always just kind of have banter. it's entertaining, it's fun, but I figured since I don't have him to talk to and my handy dandy little Spider-Man Venom doll here, I'm not sure the lawyers will let us have this on, it's probably trademark infringement. I don't think Venom's going to be a good banterer though. So since Venom's not going to work, my second option here was I tried, you guys all remember our favorite little book, right? Microsoft Search for SharePoint 2007, 2008. Thought about seeing if I could get Tom or Rich there to chat with me, because God knows that book, while it is well written, there's a lot of great content in there, especially my 1-2 chapters. Thankfully, Todd did not participate on the book. Really though, we sold I think it's 250 copies worldwide after, it's been 5-6 years now. It's just one of those books that, the 1,000 that we gave out for free, everyone loved it, but we just couldn't get anyone to buy it. So it's kind of a little sad. But that was my second option for banter, and that didn't work out either. So instead, I guess we'll talk a little bit about information architecture and governance, because that seemed like a fun topic that Todd probably doesn't cover very often, because he doesn't believe in most of that stuff, so I think that's why he doesn't cover it. That's not true. He believes in it. He just he's never been really fiery about talking about it, and I've always kind of enjoyed it. So what I wanted to go over a little bit was kind of how we work through the process, right? And it's been a while since I've had to break it down, but one of the biggest things I've always worked for with people is, and Doug would like to point out that he uses a copy of one of those search books for holding up his monitor. So thanks, Doug. You didn't really distract me, but I thought it was worth noting that the book did work very well for a monitor stand. But so, as we look at the governance, one of the things I've always talked to people about is getting your data broken up into buckets. And I think that the buckets is really what helps drive it. And so I like to break it down into 3 buckets. One is your intranet/portal bucket, right? So that bucket for me is where all the company will go to read data, and then the, a few people, just couple key contributors, they'll have access. So for example, when the new HR policy on sexual harassment comes out, that will get put out in, what is it, portal.company.com/HR, and then that's where you're going to find all the policies. But that's my rule of thumb. Anything that goes into that particular bucket, the whole company has read access to. If you say, hey, I want the whole company to edit something or work on something, that doesn't belong in that bucket, because it should always be static or slow to change information. So then the second bucket of information I like to use is the team, right? So team.company.com. And so in that bucket, the idea is that I want to create a site collection for each one of the teams at my company. Now, I don't want to say departments or groups, because sometimes some teams are cross-functional, right? The exchange team might be made up of a storage engineer, a support engineer, and the actual exchange engineer. But they're all not in the same department maybe, or the same org structure, but they are the team that's what keeps exchange running. So I like to see those site collections broke up into buckets like that, site collections per team. And with those, I then set a quota, right? It might be 5 gigs, 10 gigs, something, depending on your needs. And then I let those teams do their own thing. But the idea is that only the people on that team can actually get in and collaborate. If they want to collaborate with an outside team, then they have to go and reach out to, have to go and do it in another bucket. This kind of gives those users that nice, safe feeling that they have all of their data. They can share stuff without having to worry about other outside people seeing it, because they know it's just whatever team they're sharing it in that site collection. And I'm not a big fan of trying to kind of control what that stuff is. I'm not going to get out there and work my way through how they're organizing it. I just don't care, right? What I will tell you though is when they run out of their space and their quota, right, it's always a good chance to say, hey, what are you doing with it, right? So they call up, they're like, well, I'm out of space, we hit our quota. Okay, that's great, click, 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 click. While I fix this for you, what are you guys doing with it? Oh, well, we're the HR department, we're using it to process all the paperwork to get raises for people like you. Hey guys, it's great use, your quota's been doubled, call me if you ever have any problems, right? Or conversely, you have people that say, we're using it for pictures from the party, right? So we had a Christmas party, and at that Christmas party, all the different, people with their lampshade pictures, we've been putting those and photoshopping them. Guys, that's not really what SharePoint's for. Go store that on the file share where someone else has got to take care of it. I don't want to use it. So, quotas in that particular context help you drive the conversation a little bit. The third bucket is then what we call the Wild Wild West, right? That might be project or the collab buckets, but that's where we start having site collections per project. They have, they have different metrics on them. So maybe they only last for 180 days. Maybe they can only have 1 gig of data. But the idea is that we want to roll through there, very quickly. But it's giving us a way to, collaborate, and we know users know when they put data out there that they only have a limited scope. So, and it's kind of interesting. My friends here in the chat room, I'm kind of keeping an eye on. They are just railing on, all the differences between governance. Everyone has a different opinion, and I totally agree with them. Right? That's why everyone that does it, it ends up a little different. But I always kind of strive with people, if you start with a very generic framework like the buckets, it gives you a chance to really narrow it down and say, hey, 3 buckets doesn't work for us. We need 5 or we need 2. But it's about you, defining something and then working it into your business model. Because the other thing that I like to do in this whole frame of context is one of the worst things that we in IT are really bad at, right? Because we're all IT people. Is how do you decide who gets something like SharePoint Designer? Right? I was the 18-year-old network administrator once that had a Napoleon complex, which is interesting. I'm 6'4", so you would think I wouldn't have that problem, but I did. But more interesting is Napoleon actually wasn't that short for the period, but we won't digress into world history. But how did I decide whether or not somebody got something? Well, it was very simple. Did I like the person or not? That was how I made all my decisions. One of my favorite stories was, it was Friday afternoon, early spring. I wanted to go get on my motorcycle and go for a ride. Some fancy pants manager rolls in my office. Hey, I got somebody starting on Monday. You need to, get their computer done right now so they have it when they walk in the door on Monday. Looked at him and said, hey, dude, guess what? According to our rules, right, our procedures that we've set in place, the IT governance that we've defined, that you agreed to as a business, says I have 2 weeks to do that computer. So you just march on down the hall. I'm going to put my helmet on and go for a little ridey ride here, and you'll have your computer in 2 weeks. He was furious, which I don't blame him. It was kind of a jerk thing to do, but I didn't like the guy, and I didn't like his attitude when he walked into my office. And because we had IT procedures in place that said I had 2 weeks, I exploited those. So not a good example of why you should do it, but it was funny, right? So I built his computer out. It had like on Tuesday of that next week, and then it just sat in my office for 2 weeks because I really just kind of wanted to press upon him he should follow procedures in the future. So I say all of this to say, hey, that's not how we want to make decisions. We want to have the policies in place, like the 2 week thing. But what I don't want you to do is I don't want you to have the case where you get to make decisions where, when that manager, the cube manager walks in and says, hey, I really need a computer on Monday, and you say, hey, I'll work all weekend for you, no problem, right? I don't want any of that stuff. So when you're defining governance for SharePoint, for example, and you're like, hey, how do we decide who gets SharePoint Designer? It's not who brought you the batch of brownies or bought you lunch that day, or the donuts, or whatever IT food you are the one that, or what you crave, but instead we have rules. And so we say, hey, in order to get SharePoint Designer, you have to go to this 4-hour training class that we put on once a month, or you have to, read this book and take this test. We need to have a process for all of the changes that we make to SharePoint that is documented, that you can point to and say, this is the thing you do. So that's one of the things that I challenge you to do as you're debating all this governance, right? These guys are still going. But the key there is that if you have policies and procedures and rules defined for all of these pieces, that you take all the guesswork out of the decisions, you've done a good job. I don't care what your policy is. Maybe it is the person has to bring you a dozen Dunkin' Donuts, and that's how you get SharePoint Designer. If that's your policy and you're willing to write it down, then I'm all for it. I just want you to have steps for all of those changes and get them documented as you go. So that works for me, for SharePoint Designer. How do you become a site collection administrator? How do you get the ability to maybe turn on my sites? Maybe you have to get training for the social aspects. I don't know. But any of the decisions you have to make that it's going to depend, not everyone's going to get access to it, then you need to have procedures. So the next one, though, I kind of, I'm trying to keep an eye on these guys, but man, I set off a firestorm in the chat room with this topic. But another thing they're fighting about is quotas. All right, so let's be very clear. If there's only one thing you take from this entire show, that is Shane is a better host than Todd. If there's only two things you take from this show, the second one is quotas. What site collections in the world should have quotas? The answer is very, very simple. Every single site collection on the planet must have a quota. But Shane, we don't want to stymie our users, right? We want them to use SharePoint. We want them to embrace it. If we put quotas in there, that's just going to stop them. No, it's not. What it's going to do is it's going to give you checks and balances. One of my favorite stories of a case of this being proven out. So I had a customer, this is back, they went from 2003 to 2007. And at some point after they upgraded from 2007, they'd been using it, they'd been in the 20, 25 gigs, one site collection, their whole portal, if you will, for a long time. They were a paper manufacturing company, years. Well, one day, their parent company actually found out, hey, we want to do SharePoint, and we know that particular manufacturing plant has a fabulous deployment of SharePoint. We're taking it. So they swooped into the night and said, guys, your SharePoint is now our SharePoint, right? All your bases are belonging to us, or whatever that nerd quote is. I'm not very good at nerd quotes unless they're written in the notes. But they wrote all of that down, or they took it over. And so then the parent company started meeting with the parent, the parent HR and the parent accounting groups. And they went to the HR group and they said, all right, HR group, we want you to start using this SharePoint site to push out the policies and procedures. That's what IT said. Then, what unfortunately what HR heard was take every file from 1996 that we have on the file share for HR and put it into SharePoint. So the little HR intern got over there and started click, 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 click. And she moved 100 gigs of data in there. And guess what? They had the same meeting with, I think it was finance. It was either finance or accounting. I don't remember which. And they did the same thing. They came in after a week, and all of a sudden that 25 gig site collection was 310 gigs. Almost overnight. It was literally more like a week, so over 7 nights. But the moral of the story here is that all of a sudden that started causing database locking issues. They started having backup and recovery issues. The SharePoint went down at 2 a.m. every night. Why did it go down? Because the timer, the workflow history update job locked all the tables so it could scan through that 300 gigs. So they called me up. Hey, SharePoint's broken. The sky is falling. We deleted a bunch of these XML files. We still didn't make it any better. Well, that's great. I said, okay, well, we can fix this. We just need to get it broken up. They're like, all right, we'll break our site collection up into a bunch. It's like, no problem. I don't know if you remember the tools back in 2007. There wasn't a lot to do that. So it took me about 6 months to break that thing up. Good news was I was a billable by the hour consultant. You can see my nice brick background there. It was paid for in part by their inability to have a quota on their site collection. Right? So imagine if in their 25 gig site collection they had set a quota for 50 gigs, right? Some double their size. Well, when they hit that on that second night of that intern moving stuff, and she would have been like, "It's broke. What's wrong?" Someone could have stepped in and said, "Hey, no problem. What it is, you hit the quota. Why in the world did we double our space all of a sudden?" "Oh, it's because you're dragging those files in there. We didn't mean for you to do that." Right? They could have saved themselves, let's say tens of thousands of dollars in work that took place to undo something that a simple quota could have done. So I cannot do enough to say, hey, you really, really, really need some quotas. So that is, to me, is a very important piece of all this. So we talked about buckets. We talked about quotas twice. Other things that I could tell you in this whole thing, right? This is a month-long conversation, but we all have seen the governance document. It's like 30, 40, 50, 100 pages. Yeah. We all produce them. But the key to it is while you're creating it, is it should be like a 2 or 3 page document, right? I did this particular project for one of the Fortune, we'll say 100 companies for their SharePoint governance. And in reality, we worked on a 2-page document that became like a 7-page document of all the real topics we wanted in there and all the things we wanted fixed. And once we all agreed on those 7 pages, because that was information we needed to read, we can consume, it was very concise, I then took that 7-page document and bloated it out to like 40 pages because that's what they want. Their corporate governance committee wanted to see at the end was, a big mega document. So if you feel like you're on the quest to have to write that 40-page document, don't try and write it as you go. Work on a very small, concise document with all the topics you need to hit, all the answers. How are you going to get SharePoint Designer? Do you allow customizations? How are you going to handle project server? How are you going to handle upgrades? What's your maintenance window? What's your SLA? And once you get through all of that, then and only then, you probably can hear the dog in the background barking. Once you've done all of that, then take and bloat it out to some mega document that you need. And speaking of the dog barking, hang on. One of my biggest complaints about the Todd Klindt Netcast is that it's always about cats, and no one likes cats. So I think the only way to do this is to introduce a dog. So I want you to meet Pugsly. He's very difficult to see here, but Pugsly is a puggle, which is a very fun little designer dog. What's interesting about Pugsly is we bought him because he's supposed to be 15 to 18 pounds. Well, I think enough of you have seen me before can guess the size of me. The thing that I was just holding, that I had to hold with 2 arms, weighs more like 45 pounds. So he might be what we refer to as the fat dog. So Pugsly, I will tell you, everyone's saying hi. He went back to sleep. We also over there, we have Tyson, but I don't want to get Tyson up. Tyson is like a 15-year-old boxer, so if I picked him up, he might break in half, literally. So just know Tyson's over there. Pugsly is not 60. Pugsly is more like, what is Pugsly? I think he's like 8. So, I'll leave that. Todd shows up because he knew that I was talking about dogs on his Netcast. Ha ha, Todd. Enjoy the dog love. Aw, Katie, that's very sweet of you. All right, so that brings us through all of the different pieces. So let me switch back over here to my notes. I probably will break something in the process, just being honest with you. Yep, it's mad. Let's try and sign back in. Oh, look at you guys. You're asking Todd to save you. That's very sweet. Todd, you're on vacation. Just go away. So, let's see. That gets us through our topics on those pieces. And now, get down here. And so the promotion stuff. Oh, Todd can't get the Ustream, so he can't see my pretty house. Speaking of that, one of the things I'd like to make sure that you all notice is right there above my head. It's hard to tell where that's going to be on the recording, but that is the infamous ceiling fan. So if you all remember the fun that Todd had with trying to chop his arm off, that's the ceiling fan he did it on. Fortunately, we have replaced the globe, so hopefully it's a little better. And apparently I have a shiny forehead is what the room has just told me. All right. So getting into the shameless self-promotion for Todd. I don't know how it's self-promotion when I'm reading about Todd, but he will be at the Australian SharePoint Conference July 15th and 16th at Hilton, Sydney. So that'll be pretty awesome. What's really cool about him going there is he will not be in the country to do the Netcast. So, if I didn't screw up tonight's too bad, guess what that means? Special host again. And if I get to return to be the special host, I can tell you that what's going to happen is, and I got a couple surprises up my sleeve. I think you know, I mean, I know the dogs was a pretty big change, but I think I got something a little cooler for the next time if I'm the special host. After Todd finishes up in Australia, he's going to drive a quick little jaunt over, maybe do a walkabout over to New Zealand. And July 22nd and 23rd, he'll be at the Langham, Auckland. There he's going to be doing the Visual Studio session, the PowerShell with SharePoint Online, the one I wrote. He's taking my stuff down under. And so that'll be pretty cool. So if you guys are down that way, you know, definitely check out Todd. Tell him how happy you are that he's there so I can be on the Netcast. He'll appreciate things like that. Then we've got SP TechCon coming up in September 16th through the 19th over in Boston. Todd and I will both be doing the Shane and Todd show there. We'll be doing a half day on upgrade, some admin stuff, and one other topic, which I am currently PowerShell. So we'll have all three of those. One's a half day and the other two just normal breakout sessions. I also plan on playing golf while I'm in Boston, so I think that'll be kind of nice. And then Todd has listed here the SharePoint Exchange Forum in Stockholm. That is September 29th through the 30th. He'll be doing Visual Studio and Upgrade over there. As his boss, though, I don't remember approving that trip, so, you know, that one might be to be determined. But I think that is all of the selfless, shameless promotion for Todd. Venom is still here, in case you missed him. I don't know why I have an action figure, but I have two crazy boys, so that's probably something to do with it. And I think on that note, we're going to call it a night, folks. So, hey, I appreciate you persevering with me. You know, be sure to get out there and tweet and tell me all the things I could do differently. Apparently, I'm supposed to need some different foundation. My forehead's a little shiny. I got that one, so you can save those tweets. But, you know, thanks, guys, and have a great night.